Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting week of Principles of Macroeconomics. This video, we are finally going to start building a model of the macroeconomy. Thus far this semester, we've built supply and demand models, production possibility frontier. Those are generally micro concepts. For those of you who have already taken Principles of Micro, a lot of that was just review. Now we're going to ask the question, what is the economy? What is it, and what does it look like? In the economy, you have lots of buyers and sellers, and they're all exchanging money. We're going to build a model called the circular flow that's going to demonstrate where all the money goes and who buys and who sells and all that. Let's start off with one player called the household. And the household exchanges things with a second player we're going to call the firm. So this, of course, is just representing all of the households in the entire economy and all of the firms and industry in the entire economy. In our model, we're just going to assume one of each, and that will be sufficient. Households and firms show up in a marketplace. First, they show up to buy and sell goods and services. We're going to represent these circles are going to be marketplaces. So goods and services. Households buy stuff from here. We're going to call that consumption. So C in our model is going to stand for consumption. C could stand for cookie in your world. That's perfectly appropriate. Money is going to go from households to the market for goods and services, and then that money is going to go to the firms. The firms need to buy stuff in order to make goods and services. What do firms need? They need capital, so they need machines, or they need ovens in the case of cookies, and they need labor. Who owns the capital? Who owns the labor? Well, that belongs inside the household. So we need a second market to describe the firm buying those inputs. Another word for input economists use is called factor. So this is what we call a factor market. And this goes into the form of income, and it could be wages, it could be capital rents, it could be profits, it could be interest payments, etc. All of that income goes towards the household. So here we have a very basic economy. It's a circular flow. Notice the money leaves the households in the form of consuming goods and services. It goes to the firms, and then the firms have to pay their workers in wages. They have to pay their capital in rents, and the money left over, profits, goes to the owners of the firms. And where do the owners of the firm live? They live in a house. So here's a very simple economy. It's just one beautiful circle.
Dad, don't we eat the antelope?
Yes, Simba, but let me explain. When we die, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass. And so, we are all connected in the great circle of life.
Firms don't just buy capital and workers, rent workers, but if you're a bakery, you need to buy some other things to make a cookie. What other things would you need to make a cookie? You got your workers, you got your ovens, you'll need your sugar, you'll need your flour, you'll need your chocolate. Who sells flour, sugar, and chocolate? In the goods and services market. So the firms will go in and they will purchase from the goods and services market as well. We call this investment. This is not the same investment as investing in the stock market. This is firms going in and purchasing goods and services. This little arrow here has a name. It's called GDP, Gross Domestic Product. That is the measure of the economy. This little arrow here. All of the markets, when they're in equilibrium, all of the arrows in are going to equal all of the arrows going out. So the arrows going into the goods and services market are going to equal the arrow going out of the goods and services market, which is GDP. GDP at this point equals consumption plus investment, C plus I. In the world, there's going to be more players. It's a very simple economy. It kind of gives you a picture of where things go, where things are bought and sold. But we can complicate this a little more. Let's add a government. We'll put them over here above the household. What do governments do? First, they tax. So that's money coming from the household towards the government. That's unfortunate. No one likes taxes. And the government also gives transfers. So this would be Social Security and other transfers there. Notice these transfers don't go into GDP because GDP is down here. They tax it from some households and they give it to other households. That's just a transfer. That's not changing GDP in any sense. If you just do a pure cash transfer from one person to another person, you haven't created more economic activity overall. Governments do engage in economic activity. When a government hires a software firm to develop the DMV website, that is creating value. That's creating a good or service. When the government hires a garbage truck to go around and pick up your trash, that's capital that the government is purchasing. We can show that in the economy as an arrow going from the government towards the goods and services market. And we'll just label this one big fat G. So at this stage, we have GDP equaling C plus I plus G. This is a closed economy. What do we mean by closed? We're not trading with the outside world. We haven't put the outside world in here yet. Let's do that now. That'll be our fourth player in our market. The rest of the world, so everyone outside of your domestic country, and they buy and sell stuff. When money leaves the world and goes into our country, that is them purchasing our stuff. Call it an export, put an EX. And then when money comes from our country and goes towards the rest of the world, it's doing that because we're buying the world stuff, and that's called an import. And if you put both of those together, we can call that net exports. Net exports. Sometimes it's just called NX for short. Now we have the full equation for GDP. GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus net exports. Consumption plus investment plus government expenditures plus net exports. The reason why we have to subtract imports from GDP is because when our money leaves and goes to another nation, we get goods and services back. And those goods and services are going to be counted either in G plus I or C, depending on who's purchasing the import. We need one more market. What's a major economic activity that we haven't modeled in here yet? What are households allowed to do at this point? They can pay taxes, and they can buy stuff, or they can work and receive wages there. When you watch the nightly news and people are saying, hey, the economy's doing this, or the market's doing this, or, oh, the market improved by 20% in the past year. What a great year for the market. Are they describing anything that we have here? They're not. Usually they're describing the financial market, which holds the stock market, the banks, buying bonds, government bonds and corporate bonds. So this market, we're going to put over here on the side, this is called the financial market. So who participates here? Well, households will put their savings there. So you can put your 401k if you're retiring or any other form of savings. And you put your savings into your bank, your savings and loans, into a wealth management fund. The financial market also can go to the government and say, hey, government, I want to purchase some of your bonds. Another way of thinking that is that the government lends money to the financial market. Firms participate in the financial market too. They take out loans. So when they take out loans, that's money going from the financial market towards the firms. So they can do loans from banks and they can sell stocks. And they sell stocks through financial markets. So a firm such as Apple, if you want to buy stock from them, Apple goes to a bank and they say, hey, bank, I want to sell Apple stock. And then the bank coordinates all the things, does all the paperwork, hires all the lawyers, and then the bank then goes to Wall Street and starts selling Apple shares. And so the bank's activity and Wall Street Stock Exchange is going to be considered the financial market. There's another player, and that is the rest of the world also participates in the financial market. And this is not thought of as often as imports and exports of goods and services. The rest of the world can give money into our nation. We can place money into the rest of the world via the financial market as well. So if money is going from the domestic country to the rest of the world, that means foreign countries, so I'm going to write foreign here, are borrowing from the US. So say JP Morgan is giving a loan to the Argentine government, or those foreign nations are selling assets. So we're going to do foreign borrowing and sales. So if domestic banks are purchasing assets in the rest of the world, so say JP Morgan Chase is going into Southeast Asia and they are purchasing assets there. A manufacturing plant goes to JP Morgan and say, hey, JP Morgan, give me a loan. And we're going to take that loan and we're going to go into Southeast Asia and we're going to build a new manufacturing plant. That activity of JP Morgan purchasing and investing in Southeast Asia is money leaving the United States and going elsewhere. They're doing that to create a profit. And eventually those profits will come back home, and that will look like this. Another part of this story is this is when foreign entities are lending to the United States. Perhaps they're purchasing government bonds, Or perhaps the United States goes to Deutsche Bank to get a loan from Deutsche Bank, or they go to London, or they go to the Swiss bank. So foreign entities are lending to the United States. Or, and this is also important, perhaps they are purchasing US assets. So they are, another way of thinking that is that they are investing into the United States assets. So they see wonderful opportunities for economic expansion within the United States. And so they send their money here and they purchase things and they create new manufacturing plants, or they create new utility lines, or they invest in software companies, or they buy our stock because they think our stock is going to do better than elsewhere. They might come in here and purchase real estate, thinking that real estate investment in the US is a really good deal. This is money coming in. And this is it. I mean, I know it's a little messy. I hope going through it slowly helped you see it, but this is our circular flow of the economy. We've got 4 players: the government, the household, the firm, and the world, and we've modeled 3 markets. Now, in the real world, of course, there's a lot more money changing hands. Like you could have the government going directly to the rest of the world, and we kind of ignored that. You can have firms paying taxes directly to the government, and we kind of ignored that in our simple model. I want to talk a little more about where GDP comes from. Notice that money in this model goes in the circle, more or less, the outer circle, the inner circle. And it's just going to go around and around and around and around and around forever. The measurement of GDP is just trying to get a slice of that river, that lazy river that's flowing around. It just wants to look at one part of that lazy river and see how much water is flowing through at that spot. And so we choose to pick the spot of total domestic expenditures, or total domestic spending, all consumption spending, government spending, investment spending, and net export spending. But if we went over to another side, to the income side, we should get a similar thing, because all of the money that people spend is going to be equal to all the money that people bring in as a form of income. When I go get a haircut, well, I cut my own hair. When my wife goes and gets a haircut, she pays the hairdresser, and then the hairdresser brings that money home in the form of income. For my wife, it was an expenditure, and for the hairdresser, it was an income. So expenditure equals income in the economy. I want to make another point. Notice the stock market. Is the stock market the same thing as the economy? It's not. In fact, it's a relatively small portion of the economy. The stock market can do this all day, but then the GDP can hum along normal. So there's periods when the stock market will start falling and falling dramatically, and everyone will start getting worried that, oh no, we're going to get unemployment, or oh no, we're going to see a recession. And then the stock market will recover on its own, and GDP is the same just as it was before and after. All right. Well, that finishes up our discussion of the great circle of the economy. I hope you found that enlightening, and we'll see you in the next video when we break down GDP even more.
And just for fun, here's the very first circular diagram. This belonged to Quesnay, a French economist who preceded Adam Smith. As you can see, it's all zigzaggy. It was known as the tableau économique. Next, we've got this real crazy diagram from 1922. Pause the video and take a look where all the money goes throughout the economy.